Hello viewers, and thank you so much for joining us once again on the Big Talk. Today, in this episode, we are having a sit down with the Amalgamated Rural Teachers Union of Zimbabwe, R2's president, Mr. Obed Masaraure. We have all heard and seen what has been going on social media in terms of the planned protest, particularly from teachers themselves. And we want to seek an understanding in terms of why they embarking on industrial action at this point in time. Mr. Masaraure, welcome to the Big Talk.
Thank you so much, Costa, for bringing us. Greetings, viewers.
So, generally, I just want to have an understanding from you. How is life so far in Zimbabwe?
Yeah, I think Zimbabwe right now is a place where if you enjoy whatever Zimbabwe has to offer, it's a nation that has been hijacked by a syndicate of criminals that are looting anything and everything that Zimbabwe has to offer. And for us, the majority of the people, we have been pushed to the periphery, and poverty has been assigned as our portion. So we have professionals like teachers and other serious professionals who are living like paupers, which is unacceptable. But we have Gananda that have taken over the country, who are enjoying the national cake. Our health care has collapsed. Our public education has collapsed. All public services are collapsing under the watch of Emmerson Mnangagwa, which is very unfortunate. While all our state resources are being transferred into private hands, into the hands of a few who are favored by the incumbent government.
You are quite raising some very serious issues in terms of the teachers' welfare. But I may ask you maybe to elaborate. What do you mean when you say teachers have been reduced to paupers? Because that's a serious statement.
So you understand that the cost of living in Zimbabwe, I think, is the highest in Southern Africa, where it is shot well above USD $1,000. But the average teacher, the minimum earning teacher, is getting at least $300. So with such an amount, you are not able to fund the basics. You can't fund your education. You can't fund health care. You can't fund even accommodation. Even transport to work, you have to pay from your own pocket outside the income that you are earning. So even the government has removed from our pay slips what they used to term housing allowance, because we were taking them to task to say, how do you say $7.50 or $12 is housing allowance when rent was around $200? Transport allowance was around $8, and they have to remove it from the pay slip so that people can't challenge them. So these are the pathetic incomes that we are getting. So the government of Emmerson Mnangagwa slashed the teacher salaries in 2018, post-October 2018. So a teacher who used to earn around $540, the salaries at some point were reduced to as little as $30. So during that period, people had to rely on borrowing. So if you're going to look at the pay slip of a teacher, it's saddled with the debt, because when you're earning $30, then you had to borrow to cover education for your children, everything you have to borrow. So at the end of the day, we have over 90% of our teachers have unsustainable debt. So beyond earning just a paltry $300, they still have a lot of debt repayments that they have to do. So from the $300, some will then end up getting monthly of $12, some even $0, because all the income is to go to debt repayments. So this is the state of the teachers' incomes. So now the purchasing power is no longer there, and we have asked the government to give teachers a minimum of 1,260, at least that they can earn a living, because currently even children of teachers have not registered for ZIMSEC. They are failing to pay those ZIMSEC fees, which by any standard a teacher should be able to pay. Some learners who are children to teachers are dropping out of a school where the teacher is teaching because they cannot afford to pay school fees where ordinarily they are working. So for us, this is a definition of being a pauper.
My understanding is that you are getting $300 USD, and there's also a ZIG component.
So the ZIG component, we deliberately don't mention it. Why? Because the ZIG component mainly was an engagement for education for the teachers' children. So we were saying, as teachers, our children school fees should be catered for by government. So the initial agreement was that we would submit our invoices to government, then government would settle the bill. But now the government then said, now we have to give you a flat allowance, which we will review when the fees rise. But now if you do the calculations, this is about to cover for 3 children per teacher. But if you get 2,229 ZIG, that is not enough to pay for your school fees. So that that amount really is an education allowance that ordinarily should be a benefit for teachers. We should not even be paying anything to schools, because we are the service providers. So that's why we don't even mention this component, because of already government is shortchanging us under that arrangement. We would have expected that all teachers are exempted from paying any education levies, because we provide the commodity, and it should, if it is a commodity because of the attitude of the Zimbabwean government, then why should we be buying the commodity that we produce?
So, because, but do you think like what you are demanding is affordable? You are expecting to be paid 1,000 plus USD in the current Zimbabwe. Do you think they can afford that?
Yeah, this is not much. This is justifiable. This is legitimate. Remember, this figure is not coming from the wind. We just said to sit down and say what the monthly rentals. If you have a family of maybe 5 people, you need a house. You are staying in Harare. How much do you pay on a monthly basis? You are paying around $300 just for rentals only. We are looking at the cheapest accommodation you can be able to get. So if you pay $300 and you want to go to work, how much do you spend on a monthly basis? Some of our teachers use up to $4 per day, even more, to go to and from work. So that's $80 per week. So if you have 3 children who want to go to school, and as teachers, I am a child born of a teacher myself. My father managed to send me to a boarding school. So it's normal for us to be asking that we want to be sending our children to boarding schools, because the sons and daughters of teachers should get the best education because we produce it. So if a boarding school is charging $600 per term and they have 3 children, that's $1,800. A term is 3 months. So you split that into 3 months. So each month you need $600 for the education of your children. If you're going to be getting a functional medical aid, for example, the quotation that we got for your family is around $180. So these are the figures we are just working with to get to 1,260. We are not even asking for a fair wage on which we can make savings. We are just asking for a living wage which you can live on. But where does the government get the money from? The government has the resources at their disposal. Unfortunately, they've allowed state resources to be channeled into private hands, not into treasury. We have leakages in gold where people like Scott are said to have licenses to export gold without paying any remittances. We have lithium that is there where people are getting licenses to export and not paying any duty or royalties. But we are saying the state itself is...
While I appreciate Comrade Masarawa is that you are facing challenges as teachers, but one would say you are not the only sector which is being affected. Like, this is the challenge that as a country perhaps we are facing. You go to nurses, you go to even our comrades in uniforms. It's a challenge cutting across sectors. Why should you be the only sector that should be, taken care of in terms of
No, we are not.
salaries?
We are not asking government to ignore all the other sectors. You go to Namibia. The government in Namibia is paying teachers, nurses, doctors, everyone is getting a salary. They are providing free education.
Yes.
They are providing free healthcare. You go just to our neighbors to Zambia. They are providing free healthcare, free education, and among other things. You then come to Zimbabwe and look at the amount of resources, our export receipts, and then you compare them with these other countries. You realize that we are raking more billions than most of our neighbors who are doing well with regards to paying other civil servants, doing well with regards to providing public services to the people. So we are not asking government to treat us differently. We are asking government to act responsibly and deliver for all people. We even want them to create employment. We even want them to pay our doctors well, to pay our soldiers well, to pay. And how do they do it? They just have to drop corruption. They just have to be able to manage our resources well. They just have to build a more efficient state, a developmental state that really focuses on delivering for the people, but is also able to create and keep wealthy. So unfortunately, what we have is a government that is stripping the state of its capacity to produce wealth. So the state is parastatals that can be able to create wealth. The state owns all the natural resources. The state should be acting like what Botswana does, how Botswana benefits from its diamonds with a good deal with the De Beers. What does our state do with our PMG or platinum, PGM, our platinum group of minerals? They allow one company to loot everything, and then they get kickbacks, and they're giving the tax holidays. So we have a state that is prioritizing the pockets of those who are in power at the expense of our treasury. So when we make these demands, we know that the state has capacity to deliver for the people of Zimbabwe if state resources are managed well.
But let's look at your planned industrial job action on the 28th, starting from the 28th. How long is it going to be?
No, this is a one-day protest where we are going to withdraw our labor for a day. Then we will review at the conclusion of the day to say what is the government's response, what is the success, what is the next step, and we will review and evaluate to say this is the next step. But this is a planned full-day strike.
But before the industrial action, have you engaged the government? What was the feedback?
So we engaged government in January before schools opened, when we came up with our demands for education for the war year. When we were raising the issues that our education is underfunded from Treasury, we wrote to them, and they failed to respond before schools opened. So when schools opened from the 14th to the 21st, we ran an education week for education, under which we were again raising these demands, bringing them to the attention of government, and we sent a petition. We drafted a petition that was signed by parents and submitted it to government. We drafted a petition that was signed by teachers. We submitted it to government. We drafted another petition that was signed by students. We again submitted to government. So the attitude from government at the moment, they don't view education as a priority. That is why they are ignoring us. So they forced us, they pushed us to the corner. In February again, we were at the minister's office knocking, tried to organize a meeting with him, and that meeting, they keep on postponing it. We've gone to Edgar Moyo, who is the labor minister. He's a former trade unionist, worked as a treasurer for Zimta, and we thought that now with this new labor minister, things were going to be different. And we have been sending him letters, and I think he'll read our letters and laugh to say these people are mad. They don't care about our education. So this strike action is just to try to force our employer, to force our government to pay attention to what is happening in the education sector. We don't want teachers to engage in individual protests, because that's dangerous for education. Because if teachers are not paid, they will go to the school, they will log in, they will go to the classroom, but they won't deliver a service for our learner. They will protest against the individual learner who is innocent. So we've noted that over the months from January, most of them are not teaching. They are going to school because the morale is low, but so they are protesting against learners, which is unfortunate. So we are now forced to say we want to protect our education, we want to protect our learners, we want to protect Zimbabwe. So it's better that we withdraw our labor for a full day. It may be our employer may be able to pay attention to these issues that we are raising. And if the salary crisis is resolved, we want our teachers to go back to the classroom and deliver for our learners.
So your nature of protest is withdrawing labor and you sit at home?
Yeah, that is it. We simply withdrawing labor for a full day.
Yeah, because I'm asking this because there's a concern right now. I'm sure you've seen, even on social media, they expelled ZANU-PF Central Committee member, Blessed Geza, calling for protests. So I wanted you to draw a distinction between yours. Of course, yours is on the 28th, and he has called for 31. And just for somebody else who would wonder, what's the difference? Someone might say it's a build-up to Geza's protests.
No, our protest is a build-up towards labor justice for teachers. It's a build-up towards inclusive access education for our learners. ZANU-PF can engage in their infighting. We don't care. We have been protesting for a fair wage for a very long time now. I think when Geza was still enjoying luxury in ZANU-PF before they had problems with each other, we were still demanding a fair wage for for teachers. We are arrested, we were tortured for that. We spent days in prison on first the cooked up charges to try to silence us. So we cannot shelve our demand for a fair wage for teachers because Geza is also planning protest. The teachers of Zimbabwe understand very well that when there is infighting in ZANU-PF, it can even end up worse for them. In 2017, ZANU-PF engaged in this infighting. There was a transition from Gabe to Mnangagwa at some point, but teachers' salaries were slashed. So if people want to ask us to show off our demands to wait for Geza to do his thing, we are not going to do that because our demands are urgent and they have to be addressed. We can't show off our livelihoods until a day when ZANU-PF has settled its factional fights. But if Geza is fighting against corruption and we say no to corruption, someone should not come to us and say, why are you saying you are against corruption? What Geza is saying? If Geza is saying is against 2030 and we are against 2030, someone should not accuse us of being against 2030. I think it is Geza who might be joining us in a fight that we've been engaged in for a very long time. But we are not going to suspend our fight because Geza is initiating his own fight today. But for clarity's sake, we have never planned this protest together with Geza. We are not aware of whatever he is doing with whoever he is planning with. We have our own plans and we will continue with our program of action as planned. So we met on the 6th of February as the Federation of Zimbabwe Educators Union, and one of the key resolutions that we settled for was that we should engage in a job action. So we went out to plan for it, we went to mobilize for it. We have been around the country engaging teachers and they said let's go on strike. So this is after consultations. This is a product of a resolution of a meeting done by the unions under the Federation of Zimbabwe Educators.
Mr. Masarauri, this is not going to be the first industrial action that you as teachers embark on. Do you think it's a strategy that is useful, that bring the desired results, or that will rather make government really consider your welfare because you have demonstrated? Do you think it's a strategy that will bring results for what you want?
For the working people, going on an industrial action is the powerful weapon in our hands. It is not only a weapon we used here in Zimbabwe, but globally, it is the weapon of choice for the working people because the power that we wield is that can only be listened to by the employer. Is structural power, the power to disrupt the provision of service. So the employer will only listen to an employee when they know that there is potential of disruption of service. And we have done that successfully in the past. Maybe people may forget. Before February 2022, civil servants were still earning $75, which was just a COVID allowance. It was teachers who went on strike, and when the schools were closed nationwide, because of that, this is when our salaries were reviewed to get where we are to $300. So the current income we earn is a product of struggle. And at some point, the government declared that they fired all teachers because they went on strike. We went to court, and that was rescinded by the courts. So we know that if we push these people, they can pay a fair wage to the teachers. So yes, this strategy works. It has worked for us in the past. It will work for us in this particular circumstance. And we are confident that we are on the 28th of March. We are relaunching our struggle for a fair wage after what we did in February 2022 successfully. And if government doesn't respond soon, they will later be forced to respond because we will continue coming up with different tactics to force the employer to pay a fair wage to the teachers of Zimbabwe.
Yeah, but there's something that may need clarification from you. You also stand for the children or for the learners' rights of accessing education under Section 75. And you now also withdrawing labor, don't you see maybe contradicting one of your core values?
No, yeah, I think withdrawing labor as a way to force employer to pay a fair wage is the greatest service that we can do to our learners. Because if we do not withdraw as a collective, people withdraw labor as individuals, and that is more difficult to monitor and supervise. So the quality of service delivery from teachers who are underpaid continues to deteriorate. They confess to us that because of underpayment, some of them are simply logging in and not teaching the learners. They confess to us that these days they are not giving adequate tasks to the learners because they don't feel motivated. So withdrawing labor as a collective is the greatest service that we can do to leaders, because at the end of the day, if the conditions of service are reviewed and teachers are motivated, they go back to teach, to give the best of service to the learners. So this is for our learners and this is for our teachers. And we are also glad that we have been approached by other organizations who are saying there is a crisis in the education sector. Let's not make it a strike action for teachers only. The students union wants to participate. We are engaging the lecturers to see is it not possible to stage a joint action for education. We have been engaged by parents who are saying they are ready to keep their children home. Remember, we have parent-teacher associations across the country. So this is no longer going to be a Tuesday action. It is now a day of action for education, where we are saying all doors to any learning institution in Zimbabwe should be closed on Friday to the 20th of March. And now you realize that our list of demands that will be published today now includes beyond the quarterly review of our salaries. There is now the issue of demanding the disbursement for basic education access module funds, the BEAM funds for our learners. We have over 2 million learners that are out of school. We want those children to be back in school. And we are also asking for a timeline to say, when is the state going to fully fund education as is now prescribed by the Constitution, where basic education should be state funded. And now the students in tertiary institutions, they've also said that they are asking government to say they should reduce the fees they are paying to make tertiary education affordable, and they're also asking for a timeline to say when is the state going to assume funding education at that level. They are also demanding the reinstatement of students who are being fired, persecuted for political reasons, who are being suspended or expelled for political reasons. They want them reinstated, and they want the institutions to be depoliticized. We are here, lecturers are saying also they want their salaries to be reviewed to the pre-October 2018 era, and they want more teaching materials. Those are some of their demands. So the Friday for us really is just a day for education, and we would urge government to have a positive mindset instead of looking at this protest as a negative, but should look at it as an opportunity to convene an education conference for all stakeholders to say what are the pressure points, what are the crisis points in the education sector that we should urgently address, and then let's come up with a roadmap as a collective to say what do we want to achieve by 2030. Instead of focusing on a 2030 being about persons, we want to have a 2030 agenda which is education centered, to say by 2030 what are the points that we want to address in the primary and secondary, then in the higher and tertiary. We have to do this collectively with government and the citizens. So maybe government, if they choose to have the right attitude, they can view the day of action scheduled for Friday 28 March as a positive, as a starting point for a dialogue for education.
Mr. Masarauri, it was nice talking to you.
Thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it.
Viewers, there you have heard it from the R2's president, Mr. Obed Masarauri, speaking about the challenges that teachers are facing and also the industrial action they are embarking on the 28th of this month, and that they have spoken to parents and also students that generally there is that appreciation that things are not very much well, and there is need for government to really look into this and improve the welfare status of teachers in the country. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time.